everyone, it's Swank Ivy with another Letters to an Asexual. This is number 116, and today I'm going to talk about attractiveness. Some people have said in the past to me, oh well, asexuality is an excuse because you're just sad that you're not hot enough to get a man. And I know I've talked about this in some of my other videos here and there. In fact, I remember that it was one of my top 10 when I talked about the top 10 reasons people always give as excuses for not believing in asexuality. And somewhere in there is this concept that if you're below average attractiveness, then it's just an excuse for not being able to find someone. And of course, my perspective on this is, number one, that's not even true for most people, and number two, for those people who maybe are less attractive than average, it's not very nice to say that to anyone, regardless of whether they're asexual or not. And there are certainly an awful lot of people in this world who are below average as far as their attractiveness goes, who have managed to find someone anyway. Also, it's not objective. Attractiveness is not some objective quality. That said, I want to talk about this concept being used in a discussion inside the community, which is a little bit of a complicated, I guess, angle to take it. For context, if you did not know, a long time ago, a documentary came out about the asexual community. It was called Asexual, and the A was in parentheses, so it's like parentheses, A, close parentheses, sexual. So that came out quite a long time ago, before I had a book deal, before I really started making numbers on YouTube. I was making my series, Letters to an Asexual, had pretty much kind of just started around the time that I got interviewed for this documentary. I was one of the people that got to talk about my perspective. I was the aromantic person in the story. And other than that, you know, they talked to a few other main interviewees, including David J. And so the letter that I'm about to read you is from a person on the asexual spectrum who criticized the documentary because of not approving of the attractiveness of the people who were chosen to be interviewed. And as you'll see, this is kind of a nuanced conversation, and the person kind of regrets how what they said came out. So I'm going to start by reading this person's commentary, and this was something that they posted on Tumblr a long time ago, and this was what they had to say about the asexual documentary. So, quoting them, "Okay, so this asexuality documentary is pretty good, but the only thing I have an issue with is that they don't actually interview any cute aces. It's pretty good with the core info, but it doesn't exactly aid in getting rid of the stereotype that aces are fat, weird, lonely people who can't get it." Being that is in part aimed at me, I felt like it would be okay for me to reply to it in a kind of snarky way. And I quoted this person and said this: "Sorry, I must have left my pretty face in my other pants the day we were filming. Seriously though, complaining that people who aren't hot enough are ruining asexuality's chance to be seen as a legitimate orientation is really crap. There is no truly unassailable asexual." This person evidently felt bad about how that came across, and I don't know how much of that was tied up in, oh my gosh, I've just realized there are real people who might see what I put out there in public, and that I have actually insulted real people and made commentary on their looks that I now feel like crap for finding out that somebody saw me say that. I don't know, maybe the person kind of re-examined what they said and realized, you know, how awful that is. So this is their response. "Hey, as I'm sure you're aware, I'm the one who made that comment about the Ace documentary, and reading it again after a month or two, I don't know, It came off as really rude, and I'm terribly sorry. I really am. I'm Ace, and looking back, the commentary stemmed from me, one, being really insecure about how people perceive me, and two, having personally experienced the whole "it's just because you can't get a boyfriend" thing, which brings me back round to number one. I'd like to clarify, though, I don't personally think that anyone in the doc was ugly. That is my real personal opinion. Seriously, I really, really didn't, and unfortunately, I didn't think to mention that. I was just concerned. And I didn't convey this well at all, that people uneducated about asexuality watching the doc would assume that aceness is just a label that people assign to themselves to account for not having SOs, significant others, because of insert negative physical descriptor. And because I've experienced that sort of derision before, I was worrying about how non-aces see us rather than how my post would read to others. I did find many of the people in the documentary attractive, but in my mind, I was assuming the role of the outsider, I guess. And put that perspective and the idea of conventional prettiness into my post. It was rude and terrible for even mentioning that, because even though I don't believe it, I insinuated that others do, and saying that was insulting, and I'm sorry. Honestly, all of this stems from a fear of me and asexuality in general not being taken seriously, because it's so different from other sexualities in that it's a lack, not just a different version. Well, as an aside, I have some thoughts on that, but I will move on. I don't think that we're taken seriously. And basically, where I'm frustrated is that I feel like other sexual orientations have been legitimized with things like, oh, they're perfectly normal, but they just like to have gay sex, cool. But asexuality is still, and this is just my personal experience, asexual? Something must be wrong with them. I just want asexuality to be seen as something just as normal as other orientations, and I was imagining the worst. People watching the doc and then explaining it all away based on superficial physical attributes like fat or weird. In conclusion, my post was vague and unclear, and that made it rude and insulting. I apologize to you and everyone else I may have offended. I'm truly, truly on your side, and I'm really ashamed of what my post implied to the asexual community. Please forgive me. End. And I will say, before I go on to my response, that I feel like it takes a big person to give a genuine apology like that. And even though I don't think the person quite got to the center of the really main reason why this is a bad thing to say about asexuality, I understand where they were coming from, that they said they were insecure, they want to be taken seriously, they're afraid that we're going to get this reputation, and that it was irresponsible of the filmmakers to not hire a bunch of models, I guess. Though incidentally, I should also say that it doesn't even matter if you are a model. I mean, if any of y'all have followed Yasmin Benoit on Twitter, she's literally a model. She's a lingerie model and wears a lot of awesome outfits. She's pretty for money, you know? And people think that that makes it ridiculous that she's asexual because people find her sexually attractive, which, you know, for everybody else, there are still people who find us attractive, and it doesn't really matter what portion of the population finds us attractive. It's not about who is interested in us, but even if you're super hot and you make a career on it, you are still going to get torn down. You're still going to be told, well, why are you even doing this? You just want attention. You're actually having sex behind everyone's back. There's no reason to be in a state of partial dress, even if it's your job. There's no reason to wear attractive clothes, even if it's your job, if you're asexual, because the whole point of being attractive is for sexual attraction to manifest toward you in a way that you appreciate and are obviously intentionally trying to get. So it doesn't even work when it's, you know, people in the top 10%, right? So, yeah. Anyway, but I do want to say that, like, I don't know if this person is still considering themselves asexual. I don't know if they're hanging around, if they would ever see this, but I do want to say, like, it took a lot of guts to write a genuine apology like that and to reflect on what they'd said, what effect that message could have on me as a person and the community as a whole if they spread a message like that, tying it to their own insecurities and apologizing for it. I really appreciate that. And I think it's great that people can grow from, internalized beliefs that they realize are having a bad effect on them and their community. So let me read the response that I gave. This should elaborate a little bit more on what I think is the central reason why you're just saying you're ace because you're not hot enough to get a mate is so wrong. Here we go. Hey there. Thanks for the thoughts and the apology. I understand. I know it's tough to tolerate the reaction from non-asexual people as they blow us off as probably just ugly, especially if we're not normatively attractive and they can actually see that that's the case, as in a documentary. But if they couldn't call us ugly, then people like that would just call us something else. Suggest we're emotionally unstable, or horrible bitches, or hiding an abuse history, or secretly gay, or all the other fun things I'm sure you've heard as an asexual person. Having a panel of beauty queens wouldn't stop them from invalidating us. It would, however, cause non-asexual people to look at any ugly aces in their lives and say they're not really asexual because for them, surely, it's about being unappealing. For all the golden children who can't be called ugly, maybe some people might be more willing to say asexuality is real in their case, but I think it would just be one more thing that makes it harder for anyone of average looks or below to be taken seriously. We need real representation, not sanitized so-called model citizens. Elizabeth, the autistic, heteroromantic girl who got married to Brian in the movie, was maybe pretty weird considering she hammered a nail into her nose on camera. And yet, she was shown as having a willing partner. I was the aromantic person. So no matter how weird any viewer may have found me, based on what I don't know, I think it makes perfect sense that I'd be presented without a partner, especially since part of my interview that they chose to feature described me having to push away interested men. David was featured a lot, and he seemed to have the most relationship trouble of anyone shown, even though most people seem to think he's physically attractive. And Barb was just an older woman. It's hard to tell if she was particularly pretty when she was younger, but it would have been misleading to show only young people in a documentary about everyone. Not to mention, she wasn't shy about saying she'd been with dozens of partners. Point being, if the possibly skeptical audience was listening to us, they would see we're not displaying/suggesting that we have any trouble attracting available partners. And if they weren't listening to us, there's really nothing we can do. I very much understand where you're coming from with regards to insecurity about asexuality being taken seriously. It's disappointing and depressing when people look for something to blame our orientation on so they can call it a disorder or a lie. And yes, our physical attractiveness is a very easy one to reach for. But as you've probably learned by now, interviewing cute aces would be a terrible idea for legitimizing our orientation and contributing to visibility, since it would make the world better only for people who really have quite a lot of privilege anyway. I don't know if you've heard of the unassailable asexual phenomenon, but you may wish to look into it a little for your own benefit as part of such a diverse community. If you're willing, you may wish to check out my 2-part video on the subject, The Unassailable Asexual Part 1 and Part 2. Thanks again for explaining your thoughts and apologizing. Not many people would go out of their way to do that, and I appreciate it. I'd also just like to say real briefly a little bit on the idea that being attractive is about soliciting sex. Like I alluded to in my response, there is such a thing as lookism, as pretty privilege. And the better looking that you are, the more normatively attractive you are, the better you get treated. And it's not a conscious thing, it's a bias. It is a thing, and it isn't even necessarily doled out and given to people good treatment who would be sexually attracted to you or your gender or anything. It's just, we reward that in our society. We're just groomed through like how we interact with the visual world if we are sighted people. And that is most of the world. So it's a thing. And we all know that, especially for women, but not just women, any gender can experience this. If your physical attractiveness is not at a certain point and you try to do anything, anywhere, you try to get a job, you try to audition for something, you try to make content on the internet, people will comment on your physical appearance, and sometimes they will comment on that or judge on that to the exclusion of all else. And I've, of course, experienced this. I've had tons of comments about just how I look. And, they can be hurtful comments, they can be trollish, they can be kind of hilarious, but they're not designed to be constructive. There's no such thing as constructive feedback on, telling somebody they're ugly, right? So what I want to talk about there, though, is that we are, we are rewarded for looking nice, but beyond that, some of looking nice is just being groomed, like just brushing your hair when you leave the house if you have hair that needs to be brushed, wearing clean clothes, not smelling bad, wearing something that's appropriate for whatever event you're going to. And, I'm not even talking about if you put on makeup or if you are a fashionista or whatever. Just cleaning up when you leave the house is kind of expected, and if you don't do that, then you also are liable to get treated poorly in public, just from people around you. But other than that, beyond just like being judged by strangers, in your relationships, people do judge you on that. And it's not necessarily a good thing, but it's something that's kind of baked into who we are. And I do want to extend that idea of prettiness beyond visual. Like I want to talk about the aesthetics of a human being go beyond visual, obviously. So, but anyway, people do not make themselves feel presentable because they're trying to get sex solely. And if people really do think that the only reason to get dressed up, or the only reason to make yourself look how you feel you look good, the only reason to want to be pretty, the only reason to do your hair, the only reason to go to the hair salon or get your nails done or shop for cool new jeans or whatever, that all of that is about trying to get sex. I worry about those people. I worry about what they are trying to do in the world. If every time they leave the house, they're trying to get sex, that's a little scary. But then also, just what if you're in a monogamous relationship? Theoretically, if you're in that situation, you're already getting sex with one person, If you're in a kind of normative situation, it kind of doesn't really make sense that if you're going out and you're going somewhere where that person isn't going to be, that you would try it all, right? But people do. This is a normal aspect of existing in society, is that we make ourselves presentable, whatever counts as presentable in our part of the world, in our time, for our norms that affect us and what we want to adhere to, what we want to show to the world as ourselves. So it is really strange to tie wanting to be presentable to sex. And it's poorly thought out. I feel like I'm putting an awful lot more thought into analyzing it than anybody who's ever slung this at me as an insult or as a way to devalue what I'm saying or to invalidate asexuality. But just when you really think about it, it's such a silly thing to say that the only reason that you would want to be presentable or look good is if you were trying to get someone to have sex with you. And I mean, very strange that if I'm gonna leave the house looking as nice as I can, and then I keep turning down sex, I mean, what am I doing, right? So, I mean, they're just saying things like that to make it seem like I'm some kind of weird hypocrite, or that this is just what I should expect when I leave the house, is that if I look attractive to anyone, then I asked for it, literally. That they can't think of another reason why you would ever make yourself presentable. And they don't do it either. They definitely don't do that either. They are not always trying to get sex. They don't take a shower and brush their hair and go to their mom's house for dinner because they think they're going to have an opportunity to have sex with someone, right? So they do understand it. They just pretend not to because they're so eager to make us look like hypocrites. So anyway, but we are a very judgy society, and I say that we in a very general sense, of course, because there are an awful lot of us who are learning to go beyond that, and many of us have succeeded in that. You can't really erase unconscious bias, but you can intentionally act to counteract it. And, I just think we would really have a loss in our lives and in our communities if we felt like the only people who had any right to make activist materials were people who were above average attractiveness, and that spokespeople have some kind of responsibility to not send the wrong message, which is, in that person's initial case that they presented that they ended up not really meaning and not liking the sound of, that we have some kind of responsibility to not let people think it's because we're ugly. If half the population is average or below attractiveness, which that's what an average is, then, like I said in my response, we would just be cutting those people off from the feeling of legitimacy. We would be saying, well, I'm pretty enough. I get offers. I get people wanting to have sex with me and telling me I'm pretty. So since that's not my problem, since that's obviously not the reason that I am not interested and that I'm not having these kinds of relationships, then I can just write that off without looking at the other half of it, which is, it literally doesn't matter if you have a single willing person in your life, or have ever had a single willing person in your life interested in having sex with you. Even if it was true that you literally have never had an offer, it doesn't matter. What defines you as asexual is whether you experience sexual attraction, not whether you've had an opportunity to express it. So that's my long-winded way of addressing that. And I'd love to hear anybody's commentary in the comments, as usual. Thanks for listening. See y'all next time.